In this episode, we bring you the most horrifying shark attacks, from a woman who fell off a cruise ship right into shark-infested waters, to a Navy diver who turned into a great white shark after swimming into a feeding zone. But first, let's start with our first story. The evening of October 15, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the Pacific Ocean, 85 miles off the coast of Monterey Bay, California. A gentle breeze carried the salt air across calm seas, while the full moon cast a silver pathway across the water's surface. For most passengers aboard the luxury cruise liner, it was the kind of romantic evening that made anniversary celebrations unforgettable. Elena Rodriguez, 34, stood on the balcony of her 7th deck suite, mesmerized by the moonlit ocean stretching endlessly in all directions. Elena worked as an accountant in Phoenix, a meticulous professional who approached everything in her life with careful planning and attention to detail. Her husband often joked that she could balance a checkbook blindfolded and organize a filing system that would make librarians weep with joy. She was also a recreational swimmer who had competed in high school, though she hadn't been in serious training for years. Her love for the water had drawn her to this Pacific cruise, a 7-day journey she and her husband had booked to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary. The couple had saved for 2 years to afford the balcony suite, splurging on the luxury they rarely allowed themselves. Elena's husband, Miguel, was a construction foreman whose weathered hands told the story of decades spent building homes for other families. He was practical where Elena was romantic, cautious where she was spontaneous. At 2:15 a.m., while Miguel slept peacefully inside their cabin, Elena stepped onto the balcony to capture photos of the moonlit ocean. She leaned against the railing to get the perfect angle for a selfie with the moonlit ocean behind her. She stretched further than she should have, trying to capture both herself and the magnificent seascape in one frame. The ship hit a moderate swell at exactly the wrong moment. Elena, leaning far over the railing with her phone extended, lost her balance as the deck tilted unexpectedly beneath her feet. Her free hand grasped desperately for the railing, but momentum and gravity had already taken control. Miguel woke to the sound of Elena's scream cutting through the night air, followed by the terrible silence that told him something was catastrophically wrong. Miguel rushed to the balcony to find it empty, Elena's sandals still sitting where she had kicked them off earlier. His emergency call brought the ship's crew running within 90 seconds, but maritime safety protocols meant the massive vessel couldn't simply stop and turn around. The ship's engines went into full reverse while the captain initiated man-overboard procedures, but it took 12 agonizing minutes for the 900-foot vessel to halt its forward momentum and begin turning back toward Elena's position. Elena's 70-foot fall into the Pacific knocked her unconscious immediately, but she survived the impact. The 62-degree water was a shock to her system even through her pajamas, and she remained conscious briefly as hypothermia began setting in. Disoriented and injured from the fall, she struggled to stay afloat in the moderate swells, her cries for help lost in the vast darkness surrounding the distant lights of the cruise ship. When the rescue boats finally reached the GPS coordinates marking Elena's fall location, they found blood in the water and fragments of her torn pajamas floating on the surface. The area where Elena had fallen was within the Red Triangle, a notorious region off the California coast where great white sharks congregate to hunt seals and sea lions. The blood from Elena's impact injuries, likely a broken nose and lacerations from hitting the water, had attracted a predator from the depths below. The great white sharks of California's coast are apex predators that have ruled these waters for millions of years. Weighing up to 5,000 pounds and measuring over 20 feet in length, they possess sensory systems so advanced they can detect a single drop of blood from miles away. Their 300 serrated teeth, arranged in multiple rows that continuously regenerate, can tear through flesh and bone with surgical precision. When hunting, they often strike from below with explosive force, their attacks so sudden that prey has no time to react or escape. Elena, weakened by her injuries and struggling with hypothermia, had been floating helplessly when the great white struck from below. The attack was swift and decisive. The massive predator's jaws clamped down on her torso, and she disappeared beneath the surface without another sound. The shark, likely mistaking the injured and struggling woman for a wounded seal, had responded to millions of years of evolutionary programming. Elena's body was never recovered from the Pacific's depths. The Coast Guard continued searching for 2 days, but the vast ocean had claimed her completely. Miguel returned to Phoenix a broken man, carrying only the memories of their 10 years together and the crushing weight of what-if scenarios that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The cruise line implemented enhanced balcony safety barriers and mandatory safety briefings about the dangers of leaning over railings. But for Miguel, these changes came too late to matter. As the sun rose over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Elena would have loved to photograph, the ocean kept its secret. But while the depths off California had claimed one life in their cold embrace, hundreds of miles south, another tragedy was already unfolding in the warm waters of Florida, where a different kind of predator prowled in the shallows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The morning of August 14, 2014 dawned with deceptive beauty at Ponce Inlet, Florida. The sky blazed with streaks of orange and pink as the sun climbed above the Atlantic horizon, painting the water in brilliant hues that made the ocean look like liquid fire. For Tyler Brooks, 28, watching the conditions from his apartment window just 2 blocks from the beach, it looked like the perfect start to what he hoped would be an epic dawn session. Tyler embodied everything people imagined when they thought of a Florida surfer. Sun-bleached hair that never seemed to need styling, a perpetual tan that spoke of countless hours in the water, and an easy smile that made them instantly likable to customers at the surf shop where he worked. He had been riding waves along Florida's coast for 12 years, ever since his family moved to New Smyrna Beach when he was 16. What started as a way to fit in at a new school had become his passion, his profession, and his identity. Ponce Inlet had been Tyler's regular morning spot for the past 3 years. The break offered consistent waves and was usually uncrowded during the early hours, exactly what Tyler preferred for his pre-work sessions. What Tyler didn't fully appreciate, despite his years of experience, was how dramatically overnight storms could change the ocean's character. The previous evening had brought heavy rains and strong winds that stirred up sediment and debris, creating the murky water conditions that made Ponce Inlet particularly dangerous. The storm had also driven massive schools of bait fish into the shallow waters near the inlet, creating a feeding frenzy that attracted predators from the deeper offshore waters. At 6:30 a.m., Tyler paddled out into conditions that looked perfect from shore, but told a different story once he was in the water. The visibility was severely limited. The water had a greenish-brown tint that spoke of stirred-up sediment and organic matter, exactly the kind of conditions that made it difficult for both surfers and sharks to distinguish between different objects in the water. For nearly an hour, Tyler enjoyed what felt like a private surf session. The waves were clean and consistent, breaking with the kind of power and shape that made all the early morning effort worthwhile. He caught wave after wave, each ride reinforcing his decision to brave the murky conditions. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning haze and warming the air, creating the perfect Florida morning that locals treasured and tourists paid thousands to experience. But unbeknownst to him, a bull shark had been tracking his movements. A 7-foot female, drawn to the area by the abundance of bait fish and the vibrations created by Tyler's surfboard cutting through the water. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous species to humans, not because they're the largest or most aggressive, but because they frequent the same shallow, murky waters where people swim and surf. The attack came without warning. Tyler felt the sudden crushing pressure around his left leg below the knee, followed immediately by searing pain that shot through his entire body. The shark's teeth, designed for gripping and tearing, penetrated deep into his calf muscle, severing the major artery and crushing bone. Tyler's scream echoed across the water as he instinctively began paddling toward shore, his surfboard becoming a life raft in his desperate attempt to escape. Despite his desperate paddling toward shore, Tyler was already going into shock from massive blood loss. Early morning beachgoers, including several joggers and dog walkers, heard Tyler's screams and immediately dialed 911. The Volusia County Beach Patrol, experienced in water rescues and shark attack responses, launched their rescue watercraft within 4 minutes of receiving the emergency call. But by the time lifeguards reached Tyler in waist-deep water, he had already lost consciousness from blood loss and was floating face down next to his surfboard. The rescue team pulled Tyler from the water and immediately began emergency medical treatment on the beach. Despite their quick response and professional medical care, he never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead 20 minutes later at Halifax Health Medical Center. The attack prompted immediate changes to beach safety protocols in Volusia County. Enhanced dawn patrol warnings were implemented, with lifeguards beginning their shifts earlier to monitor conditions during the popular early morning surf sessions. Emergency response procedures were also improved, with additional rescue equipment positioned at high-risk locations and faster communication systems installed to reduce response times. Tyler's story joined the grim catalog of shark attacks that remind us why the ocean demands respect. But while Florida's shallow waters had claimed one experienced waterman hundreds of miles south, another tragedy was already unfolding in the deeper waters off Jupiter, where even the most experienced professionals aren't immune to the ocean's ancient predators. The morning of June 3, 2015 brought ideal conditions to Jupiter, Florida's famous shark diving grounds. Crystal clear water stretched endlessly beneath a brilliant blue sky, with visibility extending to over 100 feet in every direction. For Jessica Chen, 31, preparing her gear on the dive boat's deck, it looked like another perfect day to share her passion for sharks with a group of eager underwater adventurers. Jessica embodied the kind of calm confidence that made nervous divers feel safe and experienced ones respect her expertise. With 8 years as a PADI-certified dive instructor and over 300 shark dives under her belt, she had earned a reputation as one of South Florida's most knowledgeable and safety-conscious dive professionals. Her colleagues at Jupiter Dive Center often joked that Jessica could read shark behavior like others read books, understanding the subtle body language and environmental cues that indicated whether an encounter would be peaceful or potentially dangerous. Jessica's approach to shark diving was methodical and educational. Regular clients requested Jessica specifically, knowing that her dives combined safety with incredible wildlife viewing opportunities. The group Jessica was leading that morning consisted of 6 experienced divers, all with advanced certifications and previous shark diving experience. They had specifically requested a tiger shark encounter, hoping to observe the large predators that frequented Jupiter's waters during the summer months. Jessica had explained during the pre-dive briefing that they were diving at a known tiger shark feeding aggregation site, where the predators gathered to hunt in the nutrient-rich waters where the Gulf Stream met the continental shelf. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, second only to great whites in terms of documented attacks on humans. These massive animals can grow to over 16 feet in length and weigh more than 1,400 pounds, with distinctive dark stripes that fade as they mature. Unlike many shark species that have specific dietary preferences, tiger sharks are opportunistic feeders, earning them the nickname wastebasket of the sea for their willingness to eat almost anything. At 11:45 a.m., Jessica led her group down to the sandy bottom 60 feet below the surface. The dive site was a known tiger shark aggregation area where the predators gathered to hunt in the nutrient-rich waters created by the convergence of different current systems. The water was exceptionally clear, offering perfect visibility for observing and photographing the magnificent creatures they hoped to encounter. Within minutes of reaching the bottom, Jessica spotted what they had come to see: A massive female tiger shark, easily 12 feet long, gliding through the water with the effortless grace that made these predators so mesmerizing to watch. The shark appeared calm and curious, displaying the typical behavior Jessica had observed in hundreds of previous encounters. She signaled to her group to maintain their standard distance of 15 feet, using hand signals to indicate they should remain stationary and allow the shark to approach if it chose to do so. What Jessica couldn't have anticipated was the presence of a large, injured fish struggling near the bottom just outside her field of view. A wounded barracuda, likely injured by another predator earlier that morning, was creating exactly the kind of distress signals that trigger feeding responses in tiger sharks. The shark's demeanor changed instantly when it detected the wounded fish. Its movements became more focused and aggressive, its body language shifting from curious investigation to active hunting mode. Jessica immediately signaled for her group to move away from the area, but the shark was already committed to investigating the source of the distress signals. In its heightened predatory state, the massive tiger shark perceived Jessica's position between herself and the wounded fish as a potential threat to its feeding opportunity. The animal's response was swift and devastating. The attack was sudden and overwhelming. The tiger shark covered the distance between itself and Jessica in seconds, its powerful tail propelling its massive body forward with explosive speed. Jessica had no time to react before the shark's jaws clamped down on her torso, the serrated teeth designed for cutting through tough prey, penetrating deep into her chest and abdomen. The shark's powerful neck muscles engaged, shaking Jessica violently in the classic predatory behavior that tiger sharks use to subdue their prey. Jessica's dive buddy, positioned just 20 feet away, immediately signaled distress and began swimming toward the attack. The other divers, witnessing the horrific scene unfolding before them, followed emergency protocols Jessica had drilled into them during countless safety briefings. They formed a protective circle and began making noise by banging on their tanks, a technique designed to discourage further aggressive behavior from the shark. The tiger shark released Jessica after approximately 8 seconds of violent shaking. The massive predator, having delivered what it perceived as a defensive response to protect its feeding opportunity, swam toward the wounded barracuda, leaving Jessica floating motionless in the water. Her dive buddy reached Jessica first. She was unconscious and bleeding severely from the massive wounds to her torso, but she still had a weak pulse. The group began a controlled emergency ascent, following decompression protocols even in their panic, knowing that a rapid ascent could cause additional life-threatening complications. Breaking the surface, the divers immediately called for the dive boat while beginning rescue breathing and first aid procedures. Jessica remained unconscious throughout the 8-minute boat ride back to shore, her dive buddy maintaining rescue breathing while other divers applied pressure to her wounds in a desperate attempt to control the massive bleeding. Despite the quick response of her dive team and the immediate medical attention she received upon reaching shore, Jessica Chen died from massive trauma and blood loss before she could be transported to a hospital. Jessica's death led to significant changes in shark diving operations throughout South Florida. New protocols were implemented requiring dive guides to scan for wounded or distressed marine life before beginning shark encounters, enhanced pre-dive briefings about predatory behavior triggers, and improved emergency response equipment on all dive boats. Jessica Chen's story became a sobering reminder that even the most experienced professionals face risks when entering the domain of apex predators. But hundreds of miles away, another experienced waterman was about to discover that the ocean's most dangerous encounters often occur when multiple factors align in the worst possible way. The morning of November 18, 2017 brought perfect conditions to the deep waters 45 miles southeast of Key Largo, Florida. The sun blazed overhead in the cloudless sky, its rays penetrating the crystal clear water to depths that made the ocean floor visible even from the surface. For Marcus Thompson, 39, preparing his gear on the deck of his friend's 28-foot boat, it looked like the perfect day to pursue the large pelagic fish that inhabited the deep blue waters of the Florida Straits. Marcus embodied the rugged independence that characterized serious spear fishermen. His weathered face and permanent tan told the story of 15 years spent pursuing fish in some of Florida's most challenging waters, from the shallow flats of the Everglades to the deep blue waters where the Gulf Stream carried both opportunity and danger. Marcus approached spearfishing with the same methodical precision he brought to engine repair. Friends often joke that Marcus treated his spearfishing gear better than his truck, but they also acknowledged that his attention to detail had kept him safe during thousands of dives in challenging conditions. The trip that November morning was meant to be a relaxing weekend adventure with two close friends, both experienced divers who shared Marcus's passion for deep water hunting. The area they chose was known for its abundant marine life, but also for the strong currents that could separate divers from their boat if they weren't careful. At 1:30 p.m., the three friends began their diving rotation, with one person staying on the boat while two dove together, following the buddy system that had kept them safe during years of deep water hunting. The current was stronger than expected, but not dangerous for experienced divers who understood how to work with the water rather than fighting against it. Marcus made several successful dives during the first hour, bringing up smaller fish while scouting for the large amberjack that was the day's primary target. Then he finally spotted a massive amberjack cruising near a coral head in 180 feet of water. His shot was perfect, but the wounded amberjack, instead of dying quickly, began a powerful run that created exactly the kind of blood trail that could attract predators from considerable distances. What Marcus didn't know was that a large bull shark had been patrolling the area, drawn by the abundant bait fish that congregated around the underwater structure. Bull sharks, unlike their oceanic cousins, are comfortable in both shallow and deep waters, and this 9-foot female had been hunting in the area for several days. The blood trail for Marcus's speared fish triggered every predatory instinct the shark possessed. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous shark species to humans, not because of their size, but because of their aggressive nature and their tendency to inhabit the same waters where people fish and dive. These stocky predators possess powerful jaws filled with triangular teeth designed for grabbing and tearing prey, and their broad, flat snouts are packed with sensory organs that make them incredibly effective hunters in murky or deep water. Marcus was at a depth of 40 feet, ascending with his catch, when the bull shark struck. The attack came from his blind spot, the predator having approached from below and behind, while Marcus focused on controlling his struggling catch. The shark's jaws clamped down on Marcus's thigh with crushing force, its teeth penetrating deep into muscle and severing the femoral artery. The bull shark, having delivered what was likely an investigative bite, released him and began circling, attracted by the increasing amount of blood in the water. Marcus knew he was in mortal danger and began swimming desperately toward the surface, but he was already going into shock from massive blood loss. Tony and Rick, watching from the boat, saw the blood cloud expanding in the clear water and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. They could see Marcus ascending rapidly, trailing blood, with a large shark circling below him. Tony jumped into the water with a bang stick, while Rick started the engines and maneuvered the boat toward Marcus's position. Marcus broke the surface 40 yards from the boat, gasping for air and calling weakly for help. The bull shark had followed him to the surface and was becoming increasingly aggressive, attracted by the massive amount of blood Marcus was losing. Tony reached Marcus first, using the bang stick to drive the shark away, while Rick brought the boat alongside. They pulled Marcus from the water, but the damage was already done. The bull shark's bite had severed his femoral artery, and despite their desperate attempts to control the bleeding with tourniquets and pressure bandages, Marcus had lost too much blood. He remained conscious long enough to tell his friends he loved them, then lost consciousness as they raced toward shore. Marcus Thompson died from massive blood loss before they could reach the marina, becoming another tragic reminder of the risks inherent in deep water spearfishing. The incident led to enhanced safety recommendations for spearfishermen, including the use of shark shields, improved first aid training focused on arterial bleeding, and better communication equipment for emergency situations. But perhaps most importantly, it reinforced the critical need for the buddy system and immediate surfacing after spearing fish in deep water. As the sun set over the deep blue waters where Marcus Thompson had spent his final moments, hundreds of miles north in the cold waters off California, another tragedy was already unfolding, where military training would prove no match for nature's most perfect predator. The morning of April 12, 2013 brought typical spring conditions to the waters 8 miles west of Farallon Islands, California. The water was characteristically cold for Northern California, hovering around 58 degrees Fahrenheit with moderate swells rolling in from the northwest. For most recreational divers, these conditions would be challenging, but for the Navy diving unit conducting training exercises in the area, it was just another day at the office. Sergeant Daniel Walsh, 26, checked his equipment one final time as he prepared for what should have been a routine underwater navigation exercise. Daniel's 3 years of Navy diving experience included over 150 training dives in locations ranging from the warm, clear waters of the Caribbean to the frigid, murky conditions of the North Atlantic. He had participated in ship hull inspections, underwater construction projects, and search and recovery operations that tested both his technical skills and his ability to work effectively under extreme stress. His dive logs read like a catalog of challenging conditions and successful missions. His colleagues respected his technical skills and his ability to remain calm under pressure, qualities that have made him a natural leader among the younger divers in his unit. The underwater navigation exercise planned for that April morning was considered routine by Navy standards. The exercise was being conducted in an area regularly used for Navy training, chosen for its consistent depth and relatively predictable conditions. What the training unit didn't know was that the area had recently become a feeding ground for elephant seals, massive marine mammals that were in the midst of their annual migration along the California coast. These seals created exactly the kind of marine activity that attracted the region's apex predators. Great white sharks in this region are among the largest and most aggressive of their species, with some individuals reaching lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their hunting strategy typically involves attacking from below with explosive force, often launching their massive bodies completely out of the water. At 9:45 a.m., Daniel began his descent for the navigation exercise, following standard procedures that have been refined through years of military diving operations. His primary air supply was functioning normally, and his backup regulator had been tested according to protocol. 25 minutes into the dive, Daniel's primary regulator began delivering inconsistent airflow, a potentially dangerous malfunction that required immediate attention. The regulator malfunction, while not immediately life-threatening, forced Daniel to surface earlier than planned and in a location approximately 200 yards from his designated pickup point. More critically, he surfaced in an area where elephant seals have been feeding intensively for several days. Daniel broke the surface and immediately activated his emergency beacon, following protocols designed to alert his support team to his location and condition. But Daniel was now floating alone in an area where great white sharks had been actively hunting, and his presence at the surface made him vulnerable to the kind of attack that had made these waters notorious among marine biologists. And one great white had been watching Daniel, likely a mature female estimated at over 18 feet in length based on the size of the bite radius later measured by investigators. The shark had probably been hunting in the area for days, attracted by the elephant-seal activity, and Daniel's sudden appearance at the surface triggered the predatory response that millions of years of evolution had perfected. Daniel was floating on his back, checking his equipment and waiting for pickup when a great white shark struck him. The attack came from directly below, the classic hunting pattern of a great white shark pursuing what it perceived as a wounded seal. Daniel had no warning before the massive predator struck, its powerful jaws clamping down on his torso with a force that could crush a small boat. The shark's 300 serrated teeth penetrated deep into Daniel's chest and abdomen. The force of the attack launched both Daniel and the shark partially out of the water, a behavior known as breaching that great whites exhibit when attacking seals and sea lions. Daniel's emergency beacon continued transmitting throughout the attack, providing his rescue team with precise coordinates even as the horrific scene unfolded. The rescue team arrived approximately 8 minutes later but saw no signs of Daniel in the location. An extensive search and rescue effort was announced. Unfortunately, Daniel's body was recovered 40 minutes later by Coast Guard divers, who found him on the bottom in 65 feet of water. Daniel's death led to significant changes in military diving protocols, including mandatory marine wildlife briefings before all training operations and improved coordination with marine biology monitoring services. The Navy also implemented enhanced communication systems that provide real-time information about marine mammal activity in training areas, helping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.